before we get into Cuse, because we're going to talk a lot of Cuse basketball here, we'll even touch on the football team, but just NCAA tournament, anything stand out to you from the bracket yesterday? Was it North Carolina? Anything else stand out to you?
Yeah, it was definitely North Carolina, and it's not just the fact that they got in, right? Because there's always been a conspiracy theory that if you're a name brand, you get more leeway than, longer leash than someone who's not, for example. West Virginia versus North Carolina, there's no question that North Carolina is the bigger basketball brand. So, of course, if that decision happens in a vacuum, there's going to be those conspiracy theories regardless. You throw on top of that North Carolina's AD, who gets a $100,000 bonus for the basketball team being in the tournament, was the chair of the committee that made that decision, and the conspiracy theories are running wild. Part of me enjoys all the conspiracy theories running wild, but I also think, perhaps we've reached a point where current ADs should not be the ones that are on the committee making these decisions.
I don't know how much you've had a chance to study the bracket. Which number one seed are you least confident in making it to the Final Four?
Maybe Florida, I guess. It's tough because I think all of them have a really good shot to make it. But just because Florida at times isn't the greatest on the defensive end, and so if they have a game where they're not shooting particularly well, then can a team, catch them on one of those days? Houston maybe, but ultimately I think those four teams are strong favorites to get there when all is said and done. But I like St. John's a lot too, though. So, it's March Madness for a reason. There'll be some craziness. It's doubtful all four seeds will make it, but I think, most people are probably going to be pretty chalk with those in the brackets. But I think, a two like a St. John's or something like that could surprise some people.
All right, let's move on to SU. And, a lot of work to be done, obviously. Portal opens officially a week from today for anybody who's got eligibility left who's not a grad student, right? The grad transfers can hit the portal immediately. They can enter anytime. For anybody who's not a grad transfer, they have to wait until next Monday. So with that in mind, let's talk this through with Syracuse. Biggest needs right now, I know we've discussed on the show before, point guard or a quality guard and a big guy. Do you still look at those as the two biggest needs, and in what order do you put them?
Yeah, right now I put center as the top priority. The main reason because you do have an incoming recruit that they're, I think, expecting to play point guard in Luke Fennell, the kid from Australia. So at least you have one of those on the roster in theory, and we know JJ's played that position at times, and I guess, you could have Kyle Cuff play that position if you needed to. So at least there's options, but at center right now, you've really got Mastorovich, and I think he's more of a 4 and then a reserve 5 than a full-time 5. So you really don't have anyone unless you're considering moving Donnie Freeman there from power forward, which I don't know that that's a great permanent solution either. So I think center is going to be the position that they're going to target. I don't think they want to have to split time between Mastorovich and Freeman at the 5. I think they want to have the versatility to move guys there if they want to, but not to have to. And so getting one or two bigs out of the portal would really help the way that front court is constructed.
I heard rumors that there was a kid from overseas that could play center for him next year. Is there any truth to that rumor?
There was a mention of a kid. I forget exactly where he's from, but
France, maybe.
I think that's right. But Syracuse is one of the schools that was linked to him as reaching out, and my understanding is they did reach out at least to gather some information, but nothing I've heard suggests that they're expected to move on that front.
All right, how about the player retention? I know a lot of people are wondering about Donnie and JJ in particular, and we'll get to the other guys as well, but let's start with Donnie. What kind of % chance do you put on him being back in Orange next year?
It's hard to put a percentage on it. There was a point, I think, shortly after he got hurt where I didn't feel all that confident that he was coming back. And I guess from that point to now, I'm more confident. And I think he's the big priority to get him to come back. JJ, I understand the angst among some fans, but I think he's not someone that personally I'm worried about leaving. Anything is possible with the transfer portal, but I know that keeping Freeman is a huge priority for the coaching staff this offseason. I think they're going to do everything they can from a financial standpoint, from a roster construction standpoint and all of that to try to get him to stay, because if he does have a good offseason, add some strength, develops, as a lot of players do, a lot between year one and year two with that experience that he did gain this past season, even though it was only about half a season, I think there's the potential that he has a really strong 25-26 season.
Kyle Cuff, I know, made some comments to seem to indicate that he's leaning toward coming back. You brought up Majstorovic. I think we would all be surprised if he were to leave. That leaves, Chapa and Chris Bell, who, are kind of up in the air, right? I mean, talk me through these two guys, and do you think we'll see, either or both of them back?
It's possible that both come back. It's also possible both leave. I know that's kind of a diplomatic answer, but I think for Chris Bell, if you're looking for a case for why he would come back, it's the fact that he's basically the only small forward on the roster right now. And so while Syracuse could go out in the portal and grab a wing prospect, or perhaps look at Aaron Womack, who's coming in, who I think could play the 2 or the 3, then, yeah, I think there's a possibility that he would return because, as I said, he is the small forward on the roster, so he's a starter as of right now. And even if they did go out and get somebody, at worst, he's going to have a role and come off the bench and play minutes. Going somewhere else, there's always a risk when you go somewhere else that it's not going to be exactly what you think, but someone could decide to throw money at him, guarantee him a starting spot, and that could be a reason that he decides to leave. Chapa Moore, it's starting to get a little crowded at shooting guard with, as I mentioned, Womack is coming in, although I don't think he would jump more, but you've got Kiyan Anthony, you still got JJ, and so if he's looking at this saying, well, I know JJ's going to start, they're going to bring someone else in to play the 1, Carmelo's kid's going to play because he's Carmelo's kid. He's going to have a chance to play. Then does that give me a path for 20, 30 plus minutes a game? Maybe his thought process is he has a better path somewhere else. Not 100% sure on either one. I know, that at least with Moore, he came to Syracuse, was recruited by Adrian Autry, and thinks very highly of him. So I could see him decide to stick it out, continue to develop, and try to compete for a role next season.
You mentioned, Kiyan's going to come here and he's going to play, and Sadiq White's going to come here and he's going to play. Do you anticipate either or both of those guys in the starting lineup next year?
It's hard to see without seeing how the rest of the roster is constructed, right? Because if Elijah Moore leaves and then they don't go and get another guard in the portal, then perhaps JJ and Kiyan are your starters. Depending on what they do with the front court, if they don't get a center, they decide to start Donnie Freeman at the 5 and Sadiq White at the 4 because that gets your 2 best front court players out there, then I could see a scenario potentially where that happens. But ultimately, if either of those scenarios happen, that likely means that they didn't grab something significant through the portal. So I think right now I can tell you what the coaching staff's perspective is, which is grab as much talent as you can, bring them all in, figure out the lineups and the rotations and everything else after. But I can see scenarios where both end up in the starting lineup, and I can see scenarios where both end up coming off the bench, which is my opinion as it stands right now. I would lean more towards they're coming off the bench, and that's their role next season.
One of our listeners in the chat brings up the name Chance Westry. Should we just expect that that's never going to happen? Like, is he in their plans at all, from what you understand, or do you think they've kind of moved on from Chance?
I don't know what the coaching staff's thought on his in terms of next year goes. What I can say is, from a fan perspective, if you're looking at Chance Westry, I would say look at that as he might be on the roster, but I'm not going to expect anything. I think a lot of people expected that there'd be some contribution from him this past season. If you don't expect anything and then he ends up getting healthy and figures out a way to make an impact, then that's a bonus. But if you don't expect anything and nothing ends up happening, I don't know what his prognosis is going to be from a medical standpoint. Can he come back and be anywhere close to the player he was when he was an elite recruit? Those are all the questions that they got to figure out. But I don't think the staff is going to go into next season saying, we got Chance Westry and Luke Fennell at point guard, for example. We're good there. I still think they're going to evaluate those options in the transfer portal.
I'd be shocked if he was.
I would be too. I would be too.
Sure.
Mike, before we let you go, let's talk a little football. Pro Day going on inside the Ensley Athletic Center today. I was going to say Dome, but it's at the practice facility. The 5 guys who were at the Combine are there, and then several others, right? The Marlo Waxes and Justin Barons of the world. Can you just briefly, for our listeners, describe kind of what's going on today and how something like this can help these players with their pro aspirations?
Yeah, they're going through kind of the Combine style event, so to speak, and they're going through each individual drill and trying to showcase their skills and their abilities. I think it's most important, as you mentioned, for the players that did not go to the NFL Draft Combine, because it's really the first time that they're in front of scouts and showcasing themselves. Kyle McCord had a great day at the Combine. I don't think he needs to do much, right? He doesn't need to go out there and throw. We know he can throw. He threw at the Combine. He threw at the Senior Bowl. He threw all season. I think people know he can spin it. The biggest question to me was whether or not guys like LaQuint Allen and others were going to run the 40, and it looked like, from reading some things from people who were there, that LaQuint's not planning on running the 40 today. I think that was the biggest question mark for him. I think he checks every other box. But Justin Barron and Marlo Wax getting out there, showing off their athleticism and their skills and some of those things that the scouts look for, I think it's most important for those guys, because everyone else did most everything else at the Combine in front of those scouts. So it'll certainly help those guys, even if they don't end up drafted, but maybe being priority on drafted free agents, and those guys do make rosters every year.
The last time Syracuse had 5 players selected in the same draft, it was the late 90s. 5 guys went to the Combine, right? It was Diggs, Clark, Gadsden, Allen, McCord. We assume those 5 guys are going to get drafted. Do you see anyone outside of those 5, like a Wax or a Barron, anybody else you think that might get picked, on day 3?
Those are the 2 I think that have a shot. Now, to me, the biggest thing is going to be whether or not Justin Barron tests well today from an athletic standpoint, with his agility, with his quickness, acceleration, and his speed. If he shows good speed, above average speed for a linebacker, then maybe someone looks at him and says, well, he started out as a receiver and then transitioned to safety and then played a little linebacker. So he's got a lot of skills there that, would translate well, especially in coverage against tight ends. Maybe someone decides to take a shot on him in the 6th, 7th round, something like that. Maybe someone looks at Marlo Wax and says, Zaire Franklin wasn't a top draft pick coming out of college. He wasn't someone that was a surefire 1st or 2nd round guy, but just, between the ears and all the intangibles and whatever else, and has turned himself into the NFL tackle leader and a Pro Bowler. Maybe Marlo Wax can follow that same situation, and so perhaps he gets taken late as well, with someone looking at him is similar eyes to what they did with Zaire Franklin.
They do seem to be cut from the same cloth, right? As you said, not just football and the position, but the intangibles, the leadership, the intelligence, the football IQ. Those 2 guys certainly seem to be cut from the same cloth. So I don't know if Marlo will get drafted or not, but I wouldn't be surprised if he made a team. Got his start on special teams like we saw with Zaire and went from there.
Yeah, I agree with you. And like you said, you can do all of these drills and all these measurables and have all this data. You can't measure things like leadership and football IQ. You can't put a quantitative measurement on those things, and that's why Zaire Franklin, when he was selected late, ended up making a roster and is now a Pro Bowler, and that's why I give Marlo Wax and even Justin Barron, honestly, a chance to make the league, depending on where they end up.
Yeah. Go ahead, Paul.
I want to go back to basketball really quick on one thing. When do you think Syracuse basketball will know who's staying and who's leaving, or do you think they already know?
They probably have an idea, but I would imagine that over this next week, part of their due diligence is not only evaluating who has entered the portal already, like the grad transfer types, who's expected to, where the rumors are, but also what does Syracuse's roster look like? Because once the portal opens, you can want guys and look at guys and evaluate them, but if you don't know what your own roster looks like, it makes it so much more difficult for Syracuse to offer and recruit and bring guys on visits, et cetera. So I would imagine, they probably have a pretty good idea right now. And probably over the course of this week, some of that will start getting out.
And that's a great point, too, because like with Judah Mintz, there was so much, is he going, is he not? And not that it held the coaching staff hostage. I think they had to assume he was going to leave, but there was a lot of like, well, remember Red said we have a contingency plan in place? It did leave a lot up in the air. So, the sooner they can get answers from guys, I think we would all agree that, the better it is for everybody involved. Even if a guy leaves and you don't want him to leave, at least and then you can go replace him.
Right, and with I just got one with the players too. Now getting paid, you could say
frees up some salary cap.
Yeah, hey, you know what? It's time to go.
So it frees up some cap space if somebody leaves.
The other thing to keep in mind from the players' perspective is desirable spots fill up, and so if you want to give yourself the best opportunity to not only find a new landing spot, but to do so with the best NIL package, then your best bet is to get in the portal as early as possible.
Yeah, no doubt. All right. Again, portal opens a week from today. Mike, great stuff as always. We appreciate you coming on.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
All right, Mike McAllister joining us here on the show. We've got Tim Leonard coming up at 1 o'clock. We'll wrap up hour number 1 next on ESPN Radio.
I would say Chance isn't coming back because of all of the injured players that went to the ACC tournament.